There's several differences, but there are also several similarities. When it comes to the structure of a partnership, you usually have a general partner and a limited partner, where the general partner is the one who actually manages the company. The limited partner just contributes capital, but doesn't actually manage the company. Then you also have the development of the LLPs, which is the limited liability partnerships, where every partner can have more management and hands-on approach to daily activities. An LLC, limited liability company, is kind of a hybrid between the partnerships and corporations, because those owners, instead of being called partners, they're members. And if they're also going to manage, they will be called a member manager. But if they're only a member because they gave some capital, basically invested, but they're not actually controlling the company, then they would be a member. In a corporation, you're going to have, in an S-corporation, you're going to have 75 shareholders or less. And those shareholders would together elect either a president or their directors to actually manage the company. And each shareholder can also be hired by the company. But if the shareholder is just a shareholder, not an employee, then they're kind of like the limited partner or the members. As far as liability goes, in the limited liability partnership, the LLCs, the limited liability companies, or the S-Corps, you are still limited to the amount of money that you have put in, unless by your personal actions in controlling the company or managing the company, you pass certain lines in the law where now you're exposing yourself because your actions were so egregious. As far as taxes go, with all of those are basically taxed the same with what you call a pass-through tax, where the money that you earn from the company is part of your personal income taxes. And this is all three of them are different than a C corporation, where the corporation gets taxed for its profits. Then when it makes dividends to the owners, that also gets taxed. Where here, whatever distributions or dividends you give to the owners are not taxed until the owner files his personal taxes. As far as compensation goes, and with limited liability partnerships and limited liability companies, you have a much greater opportunity to avoid some income tax problems, because in the S-Corp, you're going to have a mandatory reasonable salary based on the solvency of the company. Whereas in the partnerships and the limited liability company, you don't necessarily have to pull a salary, you just share profits when you have them. And so because there's no salary, there's much less, there's no income tax if there's no salary. The next point where you see some differences is with the management. Like I said before, with an S-Corp, you can simply be a shareholder and invest your money, and that's it. You don't manage at all. In the limited liability partnership, each partner can also be a manager, and same thing with the members. So in each one of them, you're still going to be able to either simply invest or invest and be a manager of the company. But when it comes to termination, shareholders, if they're just shareholders, it's much easier to sell your shares in a corporation than it is with you're selling an interest in an LLC or an LLP, because more often than not, the owners of the LLCs or the LLPs, they're also managers. So for them to sell their interest, it's not just a money transaction. You're talking about replacing those duties and obligations that were fulfilled by the people who are now leaving. So that's another consideration. But those are basically your differences and some of the similarities between the three. Oh, the last item would be formalities. Corporations have more formalities that they need to observe than the LLCs or the LLPs. And that is important because you need to observe the formalities of your company in order to maintain your liability, your insulation from liability.